Hi everybody. Today we're going to learn how to take a blood pressure. Um, First I have to give a disclaimer about my audience. I do apologize, however, everyone I know is either sick, working, or a flake. So I enlisted the help of my wife behind the camera, my son Spencer, our dog Scooby, and 7 of my son's closest friends. So moving on. So we're going to learn how to take a blood pressure. But first, in order to do that, we need to know what a blood pressure is. How do we get a blood pressure? So the first thing we need to know is the heart itself is made up of a special type of muscle. The reason that the heart muscle is different from other muscles in the body is because it's able to produce its own electrical activity. It thinks independently of its own, and every little cell within that muscle fiber is able to discharge an electrical impulse. When that happens, when they all discharge together, it causes a contraction. So for instance, anyone that's been to a chiropractor or sports medicine, or even has ordered a TENS unit online and used them at home, you put the electrodes around the muscle, you turn it on, it generates an electrical impulse, and if you do it at a certain intensity, you can make the muscle jump. Same concept, except it's in the heart and it's a different amount of electricity, or milliamp. So with that being said, in order for the blood to get to the body and us to measure a blood pressure, we have to know about the arteries, the capillaries, and the veins, and how they work. So first we have the arteries. The arteries are the biggest vessel within the circulatory system, and that's why we use them to measure blood pressure as well as other things. They're thick, they have elastic walls, and they transport the oxygenated blood from the heart to the rest of the organs and tissues. Now by doing that, we also have the capillaries. Capillaries connect arteries to veins. So the blood goes through the body, into the capillaries, and back into the veins, and the veins carry the deoxygenated blood back into the heart to get oxygenated. As we can see here, there's really not a lot of difference between an artery and a vein. They all have pretty much the same thing. The only difference here is that a vein has valves. Sometimes you can see them on your hands, or you'll see a little knot on top of a vein. That's a valve. What the valve does is it keeps the blood flow from flowing backwards. So the blood is constantly moving. When the blood moves up, the valve closes and waits for the heart to contract again. And as the heart pumps, it opens up that valve with pressure, and the next pump of the heart, or pump of blood, goes through the valve as it closes back behind it. So in order to understand how we get the blood pressure, we have to understand Frank Starling's law. So scientists Frank and Starling discovered that when the heart fills with blood, it's like a rubber band, it's elastic. So the more the heart fills with blood, the greater the contractile force when it squeezes that shoots the blood out to the body. So we can see if we use a rubber band, if we just barely pull the rubber band back and we let go, it snaps back, but it doesn't have much force. But if we really pull it back and let it go, you can hear the force. And if you've ever gone up to the back of somebody's arm or something as a kid and snapped them with a rubber band, you know the more you pull back, the harder it's going to hurt. So same concept with the heart. The more we stretch the heart, the greater the contraction is going to be to push more blood out to the body. So in knowing that, what we're measuring is the amount of force exerted on the artery wall when the heart squeezes and when the heart relaxes. Systolic and diastole is what it's called. So what we're doing is measuring when the heart squeezes, how much force is put against that artery wall. That's your top number. That's called your systolic number. So you'll always hear people give blood pressures in 2 numbers usually. Textbook answer is blood pressure is 120 over 80. Top number is your systolic. The bottom number is your diastolic. So that 120, that means there's 120 millimeters of mercury being exerted against the artery walls when the heart pumps. And when it relaxes, there's only 80. So in order to take a blood pressure, we need two things. The first one is a sphygmatometer, also known as a blood pressure cuff. I can barely say it, let alone spell it. Second thing is a stethoscope. We need to be able to hear what we're trying to measure. So with that being said, let me give you a quick hands-on lesson of how to take a blood pressure. If I can have Spencer come up, and I'll show everybody how we're going to take a blood pressure. Yeah. Okay. So first thing we want to do is get our blood pressure cuff here, and we're going to put it on the upper portion of the arm. Above the elbow. By putting it above the elbow, it allows us access to the artery, the brachial artery, that we're going to measure the actual blood pressure. We take our stethoscope. Now, what we want to do before we start is we want to feel for the pulse on the brachial artery. Once you feel that pulse, put your stethoscope over it, and you're going to want to pump the blood pressure cuff up until I can no longer hear anything. As we slowly let it out, the first beat we're going to hear is the systolic number, the top number. You're going to hear that steady pulse the whole way down, and eventually it will disappear, and that's our diastolic number. So the first number we hear, the first time we hear it, that number is your systolic. So Spencer's blood pressure was 108/62, which is good for a 9-year-old. So there's a lot of different things that can be told by blood pressure. If your blood pressure is too high, it doesn't necessarily mean that the heart is beating too hard. It means that there could also be constriction or clotting within the arteries. As we can see here, there's plaque buildup within this artery. So it's narrowed the diameter of the amount of blood that can get through here. So the pressure is going to be higher because now you have a smaller tube. There's higher pressure. That's where you get your hypertension. If there's not enough blood, or they're hypovolemic, or there is a cardiac problem, we're going to see low blood pressure. So blood pressure can indicate a lot of different things. With that being said, I hope you all have a good understanding of how to take a blood pressure now. And I hope everybody learns something. So thank you, and it's been a pleasure in this class, and I wish everybody the best of luck.